The city of glass and steel was a symphony of ambition, and Elara Vance was determined to add her own verse. For 3 years, her life had been a quiet rhythm of late nights, early mornings, and the crisp, clean scent of blueprint paper. Her world had shrunk to the 4 walls of her small cubicle at Croft & Son, one of the most prestigious architectural firms in the country. But from that tiny space, she was designing a universe. It was called the Oasis Project. Welcome back to CJ Stories, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's dive into today's story. It wasn't just another skyscraper clawing its way into the clouds. It was Elara's soul rendered in concrete, glass, and living green. A mixed-use urban renewal project designed to breathe life back into a neglected, post-industrial neighborhood. It featured a central atrium with a cascading vertical garden, rainwater harvesting systems that fed community allotments on the roof, and residential units designed with modular, adaptable interiors to accommodate families of all sizes and incomes. It was sustainable, it was community-focused, and it was beautiful. Elara ran a hand over the intricate scale model that dominated her workspace. Tiny, laser-cut trees dotted the miniature park. A sliver of acrylic represented the reclaimed canal that would run through the development. She had hand-painted every tiny balcony, imagined families living in every window. This project wasn't a job, it was a promise. A promise to the city, and a promise to herself. A shadow fell over the model. Still tinkering, Vance? Elara didn't need to look up to know who it was. The voice was a smooth baritone, perpetually coated in a thin veneer of condescending charm. Julian Croft. Son of the legendary founder, and now, the head of the firm. He was handsome in the way that old money and good tailoring can make a man, with a disarming smile that never quite reached his eyes. Just a final check of the lighting conduits for the atrium, Julian, she said, her voice even. I want to make sure the schematics are flawless for the presentation. Julian leaned over the model, his expensive cologne overwhelming the scent of paper and glue. He poked a single, manicured finger at the central tower. This is the one, isn't it? The one that's going to get us the Sterling Prize. He said, us, but his eyes were fixed on his own reflection in the acrylic of the miniature canal. Elara felt a familiar, dull ache of frustration. For 3 years, she had been the lead, and for most of that time, the only architect on the Oasis project. Julian's contribution had been to sweep in for milestone meetings, offer vague but grand-sounding suggestions like, make it more iconic, and then take credit for the breakthroughs she'd achieved during sleepless nights. I hope so, she replied, choosing her words carefully. The design has a lot of heart. The judges for the Sterling are known for rewarding innovation that serves the community. Heart is good, Julian mused, straightening up and adjusting his silk tie. But prestige is better. This award will put Croft & Son back on the map in a way we haven't been since my father's day. It's our legacy. Our legacy, the words hung in the air. Elara thought of her own legacy. A mountain of student debt and a younger sister, Chloe, whose college tuition she was paying for. Chloe was studying to be a teacher, full of bright-eyed idealism. The Oasis project wasn't just for prestige, it was for Chloe. A win, a promotion, a raise, that would mean security. It would mean Chloe could finish her degree without worry. The presentation is tomorrow night, Julian said, his tone shifting to business. You've got the speech polished? The slides queued up? Everything is ready, Elara confirmed. I've timed it to exactly 15 minutes, focusing on the sustainable systems and the community integration aspects, just like we discussed. Good, good. He gave a dismissive wave. Just remember to keep it punchy. No one wants to get bogged down in the technical mumbo-jumbo. Focus on the vision. The big picture. That's my strength, and that's what sells. He was already walking away, pulling his phone from his pocket. See you tomorrow, kiddo. Don't be late. Elara's jaw tightened at the word, kiddo. She was 32 years old, a licensed architect with a master's degree from one of the best schools in the country. Julian was 35 and had inherited his position. But in his world, she would always be, kiddo. She took a deep breath, forcing the irritation down. It didn't matter. Tomorrow night, they would present the project together on the grand stage of the National Architecture Gala. Her name was on the submission, right beside his. Her work would finally speak for itself. Everyone would see. The project was so undeniably hers, so infused with her passion and precision, that no amount of Julian's smooth talking could obscure it. Or so she thought. That evening, she called Chloe. I'm so nervous I think I might actually vibrate out of my skin, Elara confessed, pacing her small apartment. Chloe's laughter crackled over the phone. You're going to be amazing, Elle. You've poured your entire life into this thing. They'd be crazy not to give you the award. It's not just about the award, Chloe. It's about being seen. You know? I know, her sister said, her voice softening. He's been taking credit again, hasn't he? Elara sighed. It's just the way he is. But tomorrow, we're on stage together. There's no hiding behind an email chain. The work is the work. He can't change that. Just knock em dead, sis. Imagine me in the front row, cheering like a lunatic. You've got this. The Oasis project is a masterpiece, and you're the master. Hanging up, Elara felt a renewed sense of determination. Chloe was right. The work was the work. She looked at the simple, elegant black dress she had laid out for the gala. It was the most expensive piece of clothing she owned, bought on a credit card with a silent prayer. Tomorrow wasn't just a presentation. It was an arrival. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was a galaxy of shimmering gowns and perfectly tailored tuxedos. Champagne flutes chimed like tiny bells, and the air hummed with the polite, ambitious chatter of the nation's architectural elite. Elara clutched her small bag, feeling like a tiny boat cast into a vast, glittering sea. She spotted Julian near the bar, holding court with a group of critics and developers. He was in his element, a charming smile fixed on his face, one hand gesturing expansively as he spoke. He saw her and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a king acknowledging a courtier. Elara took a steadying breath and made her way through the crowd, accepting polite greetings from a few colleagues who offered her tight, knowing smiles. They knew. Everyone at the firm knew the Oasis project was her baby. They also knew how Julian operated. As she neared the main stage, a woman with a regal bearing and intelligent, sharp eyes turned from a conversation. She had silver hair swept into an elegant chignon and wore a deep sapphire gown that spoke of timeless style rather than fleeting trends. There was an unmistakable resemblance to Julian in the strong line of her jaw, but where his eyes were restless and shallow, hers were deep and discerning. It was Evelyn Croft, Julian's mother. The matriarch. Co-founder of the firm with her late husband, Robert Croft, and a legend in her own right. She had retired years ago, but her shadow still loomed large over the company and the industry. She rarely attended these events. Her presence tonight caused a stir. Julian glided over to his mother's side. Mother. I'm so glad you could make it. I wanted you to be here for this. Evelyn's gaze was cool. Your father won his first Sterling Prize in this very room. He spoke about the responsibility of architecture, not the glory. I trust you remember his principles. Of course, Mother, Julian said, his smile tightening slightly. He then gestured towards Elara, who had paused a respectful distance away. And this is Elara Vance, the lead architect on the project. Elara, my mother, Evelyn Croft. Elara's heart skipped a beat. She stepped forward, extending a hand. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Croft. Your work on the public library system was the subject of my thesis. Evelyn took her hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes analytical. She didn't smile, but a flicker of interest crossed her face. The library project was about creating accessible spaces for everyone, not just those who could afford the view. Tell me, Ms. Vance, what is the core principle of your Oasis project? Before Elara could answer, Julian cut in smoothly. The core principle, Mother, is revolutionary. It's about creating a self-sustaining urban ecosystem that redefines luxury living. It's bold, it's iconic. It's the future of Croft & Son. He placed a proprietary hand on Elara's shoulder. Elara has been a tremendous help in executing the details of my vision. Evelyn's gaze shifted from Elara to Julian, and for a split second, Elara saw something unreadable in their depths, a flash of profound disappointment. But it was gone as quickly as it came. I see, Evelyn said, her voice dropping a register. She gave Elara a final, lingering look before turning away. I shall be watching the presentation with great interest. The dinner was a blur of exquisite food that Elara couldn't taste and polite conversation she could barely follow. Her mind was racing. Executing the details of my vision, the words echoed in her head, a cold premonition. The casual dismissal in front of his own mother, a titan of the industry, felt different. It felt more deliberate. Finally, the awards ceremony began. Project after project flashed across the giant screens. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. And then, it was their turn. And now, for the final nominee for the Sterling Prize, the host announced, from Croft & Son, the Oasis Project. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Julian stood, smoothing his tuxedo jacket, and gave Elara a brief nod. Showtime. Let me lead. They walked towards the stage, the spotlight finding them, blinding them. Elara clutched her note cards, her hands slick with sweat. The plan was simple. Julian would give a brief introduction, then hand it over to her for the detailed 15-minute presentation of the design, and he would conclude with a final visionary statement. Julian stepped up to the podium. He looked out at the sea of faces, his confidence absolute. "Thank you," he began, his voice resonating through the hall. "When I first conceived of the Oasis project, I had one goal in mind: to challenge the very definition of urban living." Elara blinked. "When I first conceived, that wasn't the script. People told me it was too ambitious," Julian continued, his voice swelling with theatrical passion. "A self-sustaining vertical forest in the heart of the city? A closed-loop water system in a commercial high-rise? They said it couldn't be done. But as the head of Croft & Son, I believe that our purpose is not to do what is easy, but to do what is necessary. To dream a better future and then build it." He was magnetic. The audience was captivated. He spoke for 5 minutes, then 10, using all the visionary buzzwords they had discussed, but framing them as his own solitary epiphanies. He was painting a picture of himself as a lone genius, a visionary battling against the odds. Elara stood a few feet behind him, a living statue in a black dress, the note cards feeling like lead weights in her hands. The 15 minutes allotted for their presentation was ticking away. He had already used 10 of them. Panic began to set in. He was going to hand it over to her any second now, and she'd have to rush through everything. Then he said it. "Bringing such a complex vision to life requires a dedicated team," he said, finally turning to gesture in her direction. Elara's heart leaped with a desperate sliver of hope. This was it. "And I have to give a special mention to my project assistant, Elara Vance." The ballroom was silent. Project assistant, the title, so wrong, so demeaning, hung in the air like a poison. "She has been absolutely tireless," Julian continued with a magnanimous smile. "Every great artist needs someone to stretch the canvas, to mix the paints. Elara's diligence in drafting my ideas, in organizing the renderings, and frankly, in handling all the tedious paperwork, has been invaluable. She's a testament to the fact that with enough hard work, anyone can play a part in creating something truly great." He gave her a condescending wink, as if they were sharing a private joke. The blood drained from Elara's face. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. It wasn't just taking credit. This was a public execution. He had reduced her 3 years of creative blood, sweat, and tears into secretarial work. Mixing the paints, in front of the entire industry. In front of the judges. In front of his mother. Her mind went blank. The faces in the crowd blurred into a hazy watercolor of shock and pity. She could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on her, feel their discomfort, their second-hand shame. Her own shame was a physical force, a hot wave that threatened to suffocate her. Julian, oblivious or simply not caring, turned back to the audience. "The Oasis project is more than a building. It is a statement. It is my statement. Thank you." He stepped away from the podium to thunderous applause. The presentation was over. He had used the entire time. She had not said a single word. The lights on stage dimmed. As Julian walked past her, he had the audacity to whisper, "Great job. We nailed it." Elara couldn't move. She was frozen in the half-light, the applause for her own stolen work washing over her like acid. Through the haze, her eyes found one person in the audience. Evelyn Croft. She wasn't applauding. She was sitting perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her face an unreadable mask of stone. But her eyes, sharp and clear even from this distance, were fixed directly on Elara. They weren't filled with pity. They were filled with a cold, terrifying fire. Then, with a dignity she didn't know she possessed, Elara turned and walked off the stage, her head held high. She didn't look at Julian. She didn't look at anyone. She walked straight through the back curtain, past the startled stagehands, down a long corridor, and out an emergency exit into the cold, unforgiving night air. Only then, alone in a dark alley with the sounds of the gala muffled behind the thick door, did the first sob escape. It was a raw, guttural sound of heartbreak and humiliation. She leaned against the cold brick wall, the beautiful dress feeling like a costume for a fool, and wept for her stolen dream. The taxi ride home was a silent movie of streetlights streaking across a rain-slicked window. Elara stared out, unseeing. The driver kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, at the tear tracks glistening on her cheeks, at her beautiful dress now seeming so out of place. He didn't say a word. Her apartment felt cold and empty, a stark contrast to the glittering ballroom she had just fled. The scale model of the Oasis project sat on its table, a monument to her folly. She looked at it, at the tiny, perfect world she had built, and felt a surge of something so bitter it tasted like bile. She raised her hand, her fingers trembling, wanting to smash it, to obliterate the 3 years of her life it represented. But she couldn't. It was still beautiful. The work was still good. That was the cruelest part. Her phone buzzed. It was Chloe. Elara ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, she answered, her voice a raw whisper. Hi, Chloe. I was watching the live stream. I saw. Elara, I am so sorry. That man he's a monster. The dam broke. The composure she had fought so hard to maintain shattered into a million pieces. He called me his assistant, she sobbed, the words catching in her throat. He said I mixed his paints. In front of everyone. He took everything, Chloe. Everything. I know, Chloe said, her own voice thick with tears and fury. Listen to me. What he said doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change the fact that you designed every single inch of that place. Anyone with eyes can see it. But they won't, Elara cried. The judges, the critics, they heard him. He's Julian Croft. I was nobody. And now I'm less than nobody. I'm a joke. The girl who mixed the paints. They stayed on the phone for an hour, Chloe's voice a lifeline in the darkness. When they finally hung up, Elara felt hollowed out, exhausted beyond measure. She peeled off the black dress and let it fall to the floor in a heap. Sleep was impossible. She sat in the dark, staring at the silhouette of her project, the dream now a ghost. Meanwhile, back at the gala, Julian Croft was accepting congratulations. The Oasis project won the Sterling Prize. He stood on stage for a second time, this time alone, clutching the sleek, silver trophy. He thanked the judges, his firm, and, with a magnanimous air, his entire dedicated team. He did not mention Elara's name. Across the ballroom, Evelyn Croft watched her son soak in the applause. Her face remained impassive, but her eyes were like chips of ice. She had seen Elara flee. She had heard every word Julian had said. She had watched him take the stage again, a conquering hero, without a flicker of remorse. She did not go to congratulate him. When he finally made his way over to her table, basking in the glow of his victory, she was already standing, her wrap draped over her arm. Mother, he beamed, holding out the trophy. We did it. My first Sterling. Just like Dad. Evelyn looked not at the trophy, but at her son's face. Your father won his prize for a design that housed 1,000 low-income families, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. He stood on that stage and he named every single junior architect and draftsman who worked with him. He called them his partners. You stood on that same stage and you humiliated a brilliant young woman to feed your own fragile ego. You are nothing like your father. Julian's smile faltered. Mother, it's just industry politics. You have to control the narrative. She's a good kid, but she's not ready for that kind of spotlight. I did her a favor, keeping the pressure off. Evelyn's stare was withering. It was a look that had made titans of industry quail. You did yourself a favor, Julian. And in doing so, you have dishonored the name of this family and this firm. We will speak about this tomorrow. At the house. 10 o'clock. Do not be late. She turned and walked away without another word, a wake of silence parting the crowd around her. Julian was left standing there, the heavy silver trophy suddenly feeling cold and hollow in his hands. The praise of the crowd now sounded distant and tinny. For the first time all night, a crack appeared in his perfect, confident facade. The next morning, the office was a minefield of whispers and averted glances. When Elara walked in, wearing a plain gray sweater and jeans, a silent pall fell over her section. People suddenly became intensely interested in their computer screens. One junior architect, a young man named Ben who Elara had mentored, gave her a look of deep sympathy, but he didn't dare approach. She was a pariah. The boss had publicly defined her as insignificant, and now, so was she. She sat at her desk and looked at the model. It felt like an accusation. She opened her laptop and created a new folder on her desktop. She named it Job Search. She began to update her resume, her fingers moving mechanically. Under the Oasis project, she paused. Lead architect and designer, she typed. Then, with a bitter, humorless laugh, she deleted it. What was the point? Julian Croft's version of the story was now the official history. Just as she was typing project coordinator, an email popped up in her inbox. The sender was Julian Croft. The subject, A Star is Born. Her stomach churned. She clicked it open. It was an office-wide memo. Team, I want to share the incredible news from last night. Our very own Oasis project took home the Sterling Prize. This is a monumental achievement that reaffirms Croft and Son as the leading architectural visionary in the country. It was a long and arduous road, but a singular vision and a refusal to compromise on excellence has paid off. Let's use this momentum to reach even greater heights. Drinks on me at 5 p.m. to celebrate, asterisk. There was a photo attached. It was Julian on stage, holding the trophy, his face alight with triumph. Her name wasn't mentioned. Not once. It was the final, brutal nail in the coffin. He wasn't just taking the credit, he was erasing her. Elara closed the laptop. She couldn't breathe. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked out of the office. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay there, in the shadow of the monument to her own erasure, for one more second. The Croft family estate was not in the city. It was 30 miles out, a sprawling stone manor nestled in 100 acres of old-growth forest. It was a place of quiet, generational power, built by Julian's grandfather. The walls were thick, the windows looked out onto rolling hills, and the air smelled of wood smoke and history. It was a house that demanded respect. Julian drove his sleek sports car up the long, gravel driveway, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. He hadn't been summoned to the house for a talk since he was a teenager and had crashed his father's vintage Jaguar. His mother only used this house for matters of great importance or great disappointment. He had a sinking feeling he knew which one this was. He found her in the library. It was his father's favorite room, paneled in dark mahogany, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes on architecture, history, and philosophy. A fire crackled in the enormous stone hearth. Evelyn was sitting in one of two worn leather armchairs by the fire, a book open but unread in her lap. She didn't look up when he entered. "Mother," he said, his voice trying for a casual tone and failing. "Close the doors, Julian." He did as he was told. The heavy oak doors clicked shut, sealing them in. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crackle of the fire. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to the other armchair. He sat on the edge of the cushion, the familiar comfort of the room feeling alien and hostile today. Evelyn placed her book on a small table beside her. She folded her hands and looked at him. Her eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were profoundly, deeply disappointed. "I received a call this morning from Thomas Bischoff," she said, her voice calm and measured. Julian shifted. Thomas Bischoff was the head of the Sterling Prize Committee, an old friend of his father's. He was effusive in his praise, I assume, Julian managed. He was, Evelyn agreed. He said it was one of the most brilliant, compassionate, and technically innovative designs he has seen in a decade. He praised its feminine intuition for community and its meticulous, almost obsessive attention to sustainable detail. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. He thought it was curious, he said, that the man who presented such a vision seemed to have so little grasp of those details. Julian's blood ran cold. I was focusing on the big picture. The vision. "No," Evelyn said, her voice cutting like glass. "You were performing. You were playing the role of a great man. A role for which you are, as of now, catastrophically miscast." "That's not fair," Julian retorted, his defensiveness rising. "I'm the head of the firm. It's my job to represent our work. The brand is built around the Croft name." The Croft name, Evelyn repeated, her voice dropping to a near whisper, was built on integrity. It was built on collaboration. It was built by a man who would sketch on a napkin with a janitor if he thought the janitor had a good idea about foot traffic. "Your father, my husband, built this firm by lifting people up, not by standing on their shoulders to make himself look taller." She stood up and walked over to a bookshelf. She pulled out a heavy, leather-bound portfolio. It was his father's first one. She opened it on the large mahogany desk. "Come here, Julian." He rose and walked over, feeling like a schoolboy again. She pointed to a page. It was a concept sketch for the public library she had mentioned to Elara. In the bottom corner, in his father's familiar architectural script, were a series of names. Concept by Robert Croft, in collaboration with S. Jones, M. Chen, and L. Williams. "Your father," Evelyn said softly, "was a genius. He never had to prove it. He knew that true leadership, true genius, is not a spotlight you hog for yourself. It is a light you shine on others, so they can grow. The brighter they shine, the brighter the firm shines, the brighter your own legacy becomes. You don't build a legacy by stealing credit. You build it by giving it." Tears pricked Julian's eyes, tears of frustration and shame. "I worked on that project," he insisted, his voice cracking. "I secured the funding. I managed the client. I put in the hours." "Did you?" Evelyn challenged, her eyes boring into his. "Did you spend 3 years of your life sleeping on a cot in the office to get a detail right? Did you handcraft the model until your fingers bled? Did you pour your own soul onto that paper? Or did you sweep in, sprinkle some buzzwords, and then put your name on top of Elara Vance's soul and call it your own?" Julian had no answer. The silence stretched, filled only by the crackling fire and the weight of his own lie. "You speak of legacy," Evelyn continued, her voice regaining its iron strength. "Your father left you a thriving, respected firm. A legacy of honor. In one night, you have taken that legacy and you have smeared it with arrogance and theft. You didn't just humiliate that young woman, Julian. You humiliated me. You humiliated your father's memory. You humiliated the name on the door of that building." She closed the portfolio with a soft thud that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. This is not a discussion. This is a list of your new responsibilities. You have damaged the firm's most valuable asset. Not its reputation with clients, that can be bought. You have damaged its moral core. And you will fix it. Julian stared at her, his mouth agape. First, she began, ticking a point off on her finger, you will go to Ms. Vance's desk. In front of the entire office, you will apologize to her. Not a vague, corporate apology. A real one. You will state that you misrepresented her role, and that she was the lead architect and creative force behind the Oasis project. Mother, I can't. You can, and you will, she snapped. Second, you will call an all-hands meeting. In that meeting, you will announce the creation of a new division within the firm, the Department of Sustainable Design. You will name Elara Vance as its head, with a corresponding raise, a corner office, and full creative autonomy over her projects. The Sterling Prize money will serve as her department's initial operating budget. Julian's jaw dropped. That's $500,000. And a promotion? For her? After this mess? It is not a promotion for her, Julian. It is a correction. It is justice. It is the only way to show our employees and the entire industry that at Croft & Son, talent is rewarded and integrity matters. It is the only way to keep a woman of her caliber from walking out the door and taking her next brilliant idea to our competition. She took a breath, her gaze unwavering. And third, for the next year, you will remain president of the firm in title only. Your projects and major decisions will be co-signed by Mark Adler. Julian flinched. Mark Adler was the firm's most senior partner, a gruff, no-nonsense man who had been his father's right hand. Mark respected work, not names. He had never liked Julian. You will, in effect, be an apprentice again, Evelyn finished. You will learn the business from the ground up. The right way. The way your father intended. You will learn how to lead, not how to rule. You will learn respect. Or, I promise you, Julian, as the majority shareholder of this company, I will call a board meeting and I will have you removed. Is that understood? Julian stared at his mother, the formidable woman who had always been his safety net, now the architect of his reckoning. He saw no room for negotiation in her eyes. No softness. Only the hard, brilliant clarity of purpose. He had been so afraid of being seen as less than his father, and in doing so, had become the one thing his father never was, a small man. He looked down at his expensive shoes, standing on the priceless antique rug in the room his father built. And for the first time, he felt the true weight of the name he carried. Yes, mother, he whispered, the words tasting like ash. It's understood. Elara didn't go back to the office. After walking for hours, she ended up at a small cafe, nursing a single cup of coffee, staring at job listings for junior architect positions in other cities. Starting over. The thought was exhausting. It felt like admitting defeat. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ben, the junior architect. * Julian is back. He looks weird. His mother is here too. * Elara's heart hammered. Evelyn Croft was at the office? Another text came a minute later. * They're walking to your desk. Everyone is watching. Elara imagined the scene, the sea of cubicles, the silent, staring faces, the imperious Evelyn Croft and her disgraced son standing over her empty chair. The humiliation was a fresh wave. She was glad she wasn't there to witness it. Her phone began to ring. It was the main office line. She ignored it. It rang again immediately. With a sigh of frustration, she answered. Hello? Ms. Vance. It's Evelyn Croft. The voice was crisp, professional, and left no room for argument. I would like you to come back to the office. We have something to discuss. With all due respect, Mrs. Croft, I don't think I have anything left to say, Elara said, her voice trembling slightly. I believe I'll be submitting my resignation. There was a pause on the other end. I understand why you would feel that way, Evelyn said, her tone softening almost imperceptibly. However, I am asking you not to. What happened last night was an inexcusable failure of leadership, and it is being rectified. Please, come back. Don't let one man's insecurity be the final word on your story at this firm. Something in her voice, the steel, the hint of empathy, the sheer force of will, made Elara hesitate. Don't let him be the final word, the phrase snagged in her mind. I'm 10 minutes away, Elara found herself saying. Walking into the Croft & Son office was one of the hardest things Elara had ever done. The moment she stepped through the glass doors, a hush fell over the entire floor. Every head turned. It was just as she'd imagined. And there, standing by her cubicle, were Julian and Evelyn. Julian was staring at the floor, his face pale. Evelyn stood straight and tall, her gaze sweeping over the room, missing nothing. As Elara approached, a low murmur went through the office. She kept her chin up, her eyes fixed on Evelyn. She stopped in front of them, her bag clutched in her hand like a shield. Evelyn gave Julian a sharp, pointed look. He flinched, then took a deep, shaky breath. He finally lifted his eyes to meet Elara's. They were filled not with arrogance, but with a raw, panicked shame. "Elara," he began, his voice barely audible. He cleared his throat and tried again, his voice louder, carrying across the silent office. "Elara, I need to apologize." Every employee was now openly staring, some even standing up from their desks to get a better view. "What I did last night, on that stage, was inexcusable," Julian said, the words sounding forced at first, but gaining a painful sincerity as he spoke. "I lied. I lied to the judges, to the industry, and most of all, I lied about you." He gestured to the Oasis project model. This is your work. It was your vision from the very beginning. You were the lead architect, the creative force, the heart and soul of this project. My role was supportive. I did not conceive it. You did. I did not execute my vision. I barely understood the brilliance of yours." A collective gasp went through the office. "To call you an assistant was demeaning and a deliberate falsehood," he continued, his voice shaking now. "It was born of my own ego and my own insecurity. I was jealous of your talent. I stole your moment, and I am profoundly, deeply sorry. It was the most dishonorable thing I have ever done." He stood there, stripped bare in front of the entire company, the emperor with no clothes. Elara was stunned into silence. She had dreamed of a moment like this, but had never, ever believed it would happen. She looked from Julian's tormented face to Evelyn's stoic one. This wasn't Julian's idea. This was a command performance. But the shame radiating from him felt real. "Thank you, Julian," Elara said, her voice quiet but clear. The apology didn't erase the hurt, but it was a balm on a raw wound. It was a start. Evelyn Croft stepped forward. "An apology is words," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "Actions are what matter. That is why, effective immediately, we are rectifying this situation in a more permanent fashion." She addressed the entire office. "As of today, Croft & Son is opening a new division, dedicated to pushing the boundaries of sustainable and community-focused architecture. It will be called the Department of Sustainable Design. And its new director will be Elara Vance." This time, the gasp was audible. Elara's own breath caught in her chest. "Director? Ms. Vance will have full creative control, a dedicated team, and a starting budget equal to the Sterling Prize winnings to pursue her innovative work," Evelyn continued. "Her new office will be the corner office on this floor." She gestured to the large, glass-walled office that had been empty since a senior partner retired, an office Julian had been eyeing for himself. "Let this be a message to everyone at this firm," Evelyn concluded, her eyes sweeping over every single employee, lingering for a moment on Mark Adler, who gave a slow, approving nod. "Croft & Son is a place where talent is nurtured, where collaboration is key, and where integrity is our highest value. We build futures here. Not just for our clients, but for our people. That is the legacy Robert Croft built, and it is the legacy we will continue. Now, back to work." It was as if a spell had been broken. A buzz erupted through the office, a mix of shock, excitement, and righteous satisfaction. People started talking at once. Ben, the junior architect, let out an audible yes, before clapping a hand over his mouth. In the midst of the commotion, Julian stood defeated. His mother had not only forced him to apologize but had then, in the next breath, elevated the woman he had tried to crush to a position of power and prestige greater than she could have imagined. She had taken his prize money and given it to her. She had taken his coveted office and given it to her. It was a masterclass in justice. Elara looked at Evelyn, who gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a nod of solidarity. A passing of the torch. Later that day, Elara sat in her new office. The large, empty room felt vast and intimidating. Movers were bringing in her things from the cubicle, her books, her lamp, and, carefully, the model of the Oasis project. It no longer looked like a monument to her failure. It looked like a foundation. There was a knock on her door. It was Julian. He stood in the doorway, not entering. "They're putting your name on the Sterling Prize," he said quietly. "On the trophy. Right next to mine. As it should have been." "Okay," Elara said. "And? I've been assigned to work with Mark Adler for a while. To learn the ropes." He had the decency to look embarrassed. "I heard," she said. An awkward silence fell between them. "For what it's worth, Elara," he said, finally meeting her gaze. "She was right. My mother. She was right about everything. You are a brilliant architect. I hope you can build something incredible here." He turned and left before she could respond. Elara watched him go. She didn't feel triumph or pity. She just felt a sense of closure. His journey was his own now. Hers was just beginning. 6 months later, the Department of Sustainable Design was the most dynamic and exciting part of Croft & Son. Elara's corner office was no longer empty and intimidating, it was a vibrant hub of creativity. The walls were covered in sketches, material samples, and topographical maps. Her team, which she had handpicked from the firm's brightest young talent, including Ben, were passionate and dedicated. They didn't see her as kiddo or an assistant. They saw her as a leader. The Sterling Prize money had allowed them to set up a small R&D lab, where they were experimenting with new materials like self-healing concrete and mycelium insulation. They weren't just designing buildings, they were designing a better way to build. Elara and Evelyn Croft met for coffee once a month. They never spoke of Julian or the night of the gala. Instead, they talked about architecture. Evelyn would share stories of her late husband, of his philosophies and his struggles. She would critique Elara's new designs with a sharp, insightful eye, pushing her to be bolder, to think bigger. She wasn't just a benefactor, she was a mentor. A formidable, brilliant friend. The problem with most green buildings, Evelyn said during one of their meetings, swirling her espresso, is that they are designed for the wealthy. Sustainability becomes a luxury good. Your father, Elara, if he were an architect, would have made it a right. This conversation sparked Elara's next big idea. A project even more ambitious than the Oasis. It was a proposal for a series of modular, affordable, net-zero energy housing units that could be rapidly deployed in underserved communities. It was practical, scalable, and deeply compassionate. It was the kind of work she was born to do. One afternoon, she was walking through the main studio and saw Julian. He was hunched over a drafting table with Mark Adler. Mark was pointing at a blueprint, his expression stern, and Julian was listening. Actually listening. He wasn't interrupting, wasn't grandstanding. He made a note, asked a quiet, intelligent question, and went back to sketching. He looked tired, humbled, but also focused. He caught Elara's eye and gave her a brief, respectful nod before turning back to his work. It was a small moment, but it felt significant. Perhaps he was finally learning to mix his own paints. A year after the infamous gala, Elara stood on another stage. This time, it was at the Global Habitat Forum. She was there alone, representing Croft & Son. She had just finished presenting her affordable housing initiative. The audience was not the glittering, champagne-sipping crowd of the Sterling Prize Gala. It was filled with engineers, city planners, and nonprofit leaders from around the world. People who didn't care about prestige, but about solutions. When she finished, there wasn't thunderous applause. There was something better. A moment of stunned, thoughtful silence, and then a wave of earnest, heartfelt clapping. People started standing up, not out of polite obligation, but out of genuine excitement. Afterwards, she was swarmed by people wanting to collaborate, to fund pilot programs, to bring her designs to their cities. As she spoke with a housing minister from a developing nation, she caught her reflection in the glass of the conference hall window. She saw a confident woman in a simple, professional dress. She saw an architect. Her phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Chloe. It was a selfie of her sister in a classroom, surrounded by smiling elementary school students. The caption read, *, building my own little community. Just like my big sister. So proud of you, *. Elara smiled, a deep, genuine smile of pure joy. She looked out the window at the city skyline, a tapestry of glass and steel, of dreams and ambition. She used to look at it and feel small, like she was on the outside looking in. But now, she felt a part of it. A shaper of it. She had found her verse in the symphony. She hadn't needed to shout it. She just needed to do the work. The good, honest, brilliant work. And in the end, the work had spoken for itself. She was no longer just Elara Vance. She was an architect, building a better world, one blueprint at a time. And her foundation was stronger than steel. It was built on integrity. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more powerful political stories, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next.